This is the biggest power grab in modern history. The President of the United States, not even trying to sugarcoat it, not even trying to pretend. This is all about him. This is all about big government. This is all about taking away the power of the people. Listen to him.
Our Constitution opens with the words as trite as it sounds, we the people. Well, it's time to remember that we the people are the government. You and I.
The government. You see what this is all about? This is about creating a much, much bigger government, unlike anything that we have ever seen as citizens of the United States of America. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Trish Regan Show. I am Trish, and I hate to break it to him, but you know, there's something called the Constitution, and that preamble to the Constitution, they talk about how we, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, in order to establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility. What do? We do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. It is we the people. It is not we the government. But that is what the left wants right now. It's all about them having the power as opposed to the people having the power. Listen, our founding fathers were some brilliant men because they understood the danger of big government. They understood the importance of having small, limited government that isn't making every decision for you, but this is just the opposite. And they resent any individual, any business owner, small, medium, or large, that might actually be doing stuff for themselves. Because you see, that's money that they want. That's money they think they're entitled to as the government. Listen to the President of the United States talk about his socialist dream here last night.
How do we pay for my jobs and family plan? I made it clear we can do it without increasing the deficits. Let's start with what I will not do. I will not impose any tax increase on people making less than $400,000. But it's time for corporate America and the wealthiest 1% of Americans to just begin to pay their fair share.
I'm so sick of that fair share baloney. On and on and on about fair share. First of all, if you don't think your taxes are going up, I got news for you. This whole 400,000 jobby that he keeps talking about, that's called placating. That's trying to convince people of one thing. It's called bait and switch. Because if nothing else, when you start raising taxes on wage earners, on businesses, on investors, then guess what? That has a big effect on the overall economy. That means that that small business owner can't go and hire that extra employee. That means that that small business owner is suddenly stuck with higher and higher costs, which they pass on to the consumer, and we start dealing with mass inflation. This is moronic economic policy. Truly moronic, except of course, if you're a total leftist that wants a major power grab. In other words, what they're trying to do is make you, the American, addicted to big government. Just like you'd be addicted to drugs. This is a big government addiction. The more that they can give you, the more that they can keep you down, the more they can prevent you from establishing anything in terms of economic prosperity yourself. The more they win, the more power goes to the government. I hate to break it to them, but this is not a recipe for success, okay? It's been proven over and over again. You can go all around the world. The most recent example, the most prominent case study, in my view, is, of course, Venezuela, which in 20 years' time has been decimated thanks to socialist policies. The Wall Street Journal knows this. The Wall Street Journal had a very good op-ed in today's paper where they talked about Biden's cradle-to-grave government. His $1.8 trillion plan rejects the old social contract of work for benefits, with the question being, as they say, haven't we tried this before? I mean, what do you think all the preschool education and child care programs, what were all those school lunches and women, infants, and children's programs supposed to do? You know, they were supposed to prevent child hunger, right? Food stamps, welfare checks, child care subsidies, the supplement to earn income, plus public housing. What was all that? What is it, right? Why isn't that working? If that's not working, what is the answer? You put good money after bad? We're going to double down on things that don't work. You know why it doesn't work. Because it's big, fat government bureaucracy. It never works. Again, why if you go around the world and you look at these socialist countries, it's never well implemented because these people, these Marxists, are self interested players that will take a lot for themselves and leave very, very little for the people. So I am sickened. We, the government. No, no, no. Listen, it is we, the people. Let's remember that. Let's keep it that way, because that is the only way we ensure prosperity for future generations. Don't go anywhere. We've got a whole lot more to talk about, including the left's vicious, disgusting attack on the senator from South Carolina because he dares, as a Black American, to suggest that things really aren't that bad and that maybe America just isn't a racist country after all. Wait till you see the vitriol directed at him. Don't go anywhere. I'm back with more after this. The senator from South Carolina did an excellent job in his rebuttal to the President of the United States last night, but perhaps it was too good a job. He certainly struck a nerve. The leftists were in full-on attack mode, going after him because he dared to suggest that, you know what, maybe things aren't as bad as Joe Biden wants you to believe. Maybe this is all being used to gin up a bunch of emotion and create more division when there really need not be any. Listen right here to the Republican senator from South Carolina, Tim Scott.
People are making money and gaining power by pretending we haven't made any progress at all, by doubling down on the divisions we've worked so hard to heal. You know this stuff is wrong. Hear me clearly. America is not a racist country.
I hear him. You probably hear him. But it's almost as though by saying that, and the fact that he's a Black Southerner, it struck a nerve. And we saw it instantaneously on Twitter. The social mob came out against him. Look at this. I mean, everywhere you go, they're calling him Uncle Tim. Uncle Tim started trending on Twitter last night. Tim Scott gets called Uncle Tom by progressives, but he's really an Uncle Tim. And then you see Black Americans, you aren't just working hard enough in this great country. Stop blaming the racism which is woven into the fabric of the nation your ancestors built for why you aren't successful. Good old Uncle Tim. And they go on and on. You know what? Because someone dares to speak up against the woke mob. And if you dare disagree, you will be called names. You will be shunned, you will be excommunicated, you will be deplatformed. This is what they do. This is their form of intimidation. And they want you to believe that America is a racist place because it fits the narrative, you understand, right? If they can get enough people convinced that America is a racist place, well, then suddenly you need reparations, suddenly you need many more social programs, and what do you get? Bigger and bigger government. Because that, do not forget, is the goal. We, the government, not we, the people. Listen again to Joe Biden in his joint address to Congress last night.
Our Constitution opens with the words, as trite as it sounds, we the people. Well, it's time to remember that we the people are the government, you and I.
And on top of that, he wants you to know that white supremacy is the biggest possible threat the United States of America could be facing right now. The terrorism from white supremacy. Forget Al-Qaeda or any of those actual terror groups. Here we go.
And we won't ignore what our intelligence agencies have determined to be the most lethal terrorist threat to the homeland today. White supremacy is terrorism. We're not going to ignore that either.
Okay. You know what? They're not going to ignore it because they're going to make that the main thread. And they're still out there trying to accuse anybody that supported Trump policies now of being a domestic terrorist. I'm going to get to that coming up. But first, let's go back to this whole idea of systemic racism. They're promoting this constantly. They're feeding it into the narrative that you're seeing in the mainstream media every single day, into university culture, into public school culture, into any culture. Anything they can get their hands on, they're going to promote this narrative. And this is what we heard yet again from President Biden. Systemic racism is the reason why you have police killing people. Listen.
My fellow Americans, we have to come together to rebuild trust between law enforcement and the people they serve, to root out systemic racism in our criminal justice system,
I'm sorry, but what about the other stuff that's going on? What about this woman? Did you see her, Jessica Bouvet, right, out of Queens, New York? I think we get the video. She's on there talking about how she hates police on social media over and over again and how she wants to kill them. And there's a whole bunch of obscenities involved in her language as well. She's drunk. You can see her there taking a shot and saying this.
I'll see you guys next Monday at 6:30 p.m. back here on Face of Reality Radio on the Instagram and on the Facebook. And until then, the police.
And then what does she do? She goes out and she kills a cop. She drives drunk and kills a cop. I'm sorry, but we need to empower our law enforcement to be able to do their jobs, whether it's the folks at the border that need to be able to arrest illegal migrants, whether it's police officers that are trying to prevent another young woman from getting stabbed to death. And now he comes under criticism because Ms. Bryant, unfortunately, that's a tragedy, has passed away. But we have to understand that there's got to be a certain level of expectations in communities that you're not out shooting cars at 13 years old at 2:38 in the morning. What if somebody had died in one of those cars? Is there no ability for them to look at it through the eyes of law enforcement? Of course there isn't. You know why? Because they want to manipulate. They want to divide and conquer, and their rhetoric is extremely dangerous. But they want to flip it around. They want to flip it around. In fact, they keep going on about how anybody who supported Donald Trump really is somehow part of that terrorist group, right? They're targeting Trump supporters, and it's going to continue happening. I've got more on that story right after this. The Schiff show's back. You know, it's been a little while, but you knew he was coming back, for his encore. The guy who wished he was an actor, wished he was a producer. Now he's, in Congress. Hey, I guess sometimes things do work out. The problem is it's not working out for the country. Adam Schiff is a danger to the country. And now he's out continuing a narrative that somehow that anybody who supported Trump is actually possibly part of this terror effort. Right? That's a problem. And it's a narrative that they're pushing over and over and over again. It's very coordinated alongside the media because they want to basically nip in the bud any kind of dissidence, any kind of pushback they get to Joe Biden's giant socialist authoritarian grab. Here's Adam Schiff on MSNBC. Watch.
At the same time, we ought to be able to find bipartisan common ground that the predominant terrorism threat facing the country right now is a domestic threat. And the predominant part of that domestic threat is the white nationalist threat. And that white nationalist threat also has international, transnational links as well. And we can't ignore that because of a political sensitivity that some of these folks are part of the Trump base.
Aha! They're part of the Trump base. It's those Trump people, those people that actually believe in lower taxes and more freedom and individual rights. God help those people. They are a big problem for this country, right? This is what Adam Schiff wants you to believe. This is where they go to that race narrative, right? So if you don't believe in that race narrative, then you're part of the problem. Like, Tim Scott, the senator from South Carolina, whom they were calling Uncle Tim. I mean, this is messed up, dangerous stuff. And it's going to continue to be promoted constantly because it fits what they want to say right now. It helps to shut down the other side. And when in doubt, what do? They go back to the well and they just keep talking about January 6th. Here's Nancy Pelosi on and on about January 6th today.
I will never forgive those people and the president who instigated the insurrection for the trauma that they caused to the workers in the Capitol.
By the way, complete with the mask, right, on national television. Even though I have been in that very same place, you are quite a ways away from your camera person, okay? Let me just say there's a good amount of distance between Nancy Pelosi and anybody else around her there, and yet she's still got the mask. It's all about signaling. It's all about trying to convince you that you need to fall in line with what they want. And part of that means if you were a Trump supporter, if you are still a Trump supporter, then they consider you part of the problem. There's no belief in individual freedom. Certainly, we know that, right? It's we the government, not we the people. There's no belief in diversity of opinion. If you happen to be diverse, like Senator Scott, and you happen to actually say, wait a second, maybe America isn't that racist a place, they go after you. This is wrong. This is so utterly wrong. But she's out there going on about Capitol Hill, and she's going to keep going on. Whenever they're in doubt, they're just going to go back to that somehow any Trump supporter is a white nationalist terrorist. Give me a break. I mean, and let's talk about, by the way, the double standard in terms of how we deal with people that are creating problem-type riots. All right? I don't believe in going into Nancy Pelosi's office and messing up her desk and, storming through barricades of security. I'm not okay with that. You know that. I'm also not okay with riots that happen in places like Minneapolis or all over the country that we saw instigated by Black Lives Matter. Where, by the way, they'll actually tell you that it's okay to loot. It's okay to loot because somehow you deserve that. That's just a company. That's just a small business owner. Those business owners are bad, remember? Somehow that all gets excused while they keep going back to January 6th. January 6th. You think about some of the people that were involved in January 6th. There's a guy who just actually was released today. He's been held in jail since January 6th, a former firefighter who had done absolutely nothing wrong in his past. He was there, apparently, he says, egged on effectively by reporters when he was in Nancy Pelosi's office who encouraged him to go sit at her desk. And then they got the photo app. Julie Kelly over at American Greatness did a really good story on this, and I want to share an excerpt from her piece with you. Here it is. She says, a local judge authorized Mr. Barnett's conditional release a week later. This was after the event on January 6th, but federal prosecutors, as they've done in many cases, immediately appealed to the chief judge of the D.C. District Court, which is handling every Capitol breach case, to deny Barnett's arrest. The judge sided with Justice Department and ordered Barnett, a retired firefighter with no criminal record, as I just told you, transported to Washington, D.C., where he remains incarcerated, awaiting trial next month. Well, guess what? He just got out. They just set the trial date. But whatever happened to all those people that looted, in the summer of last year, and then most recently throughout the country with these problems that have sprung up with the police? Whatever happened to those people? Did they go to jail for breaking windows, for stealing stuff? No, they didn't. They didn't, and they won't, because apparently there's a very different standard, right? If you're protesting, the system, so to speak, if you're protesting capitalism, if you're protesting against white police, well, that's all fine. That's fine. Nothing's going to happen, right? But, if you do this, and I'm not condoning it, not for 2 seconds. I don't think that they should have gone as far as they did. I would have been okay with the peaceful protest, just staying outside. It was the going into the Capitol that became an issue. And then the left is going to run with it, and run with it, and run with it, and run with it. But don't mention any riots in Minneapolis. No. That's not allowed. You see, there's a total double standard here, and the media keeps feeding it and feeding it and feeding it. So I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad you're going to trishintel.com, because at least here I know, you're getting the truth. All right? And we're going to cut through all that noise that the left and the mainstream media is so fond of delivering. And I will keep reminding you, it is we the people. It is not we the government. And there is never going to be a time when it's ever we the government. We the people matter. Don't go anywhere. I got a lot more coming up. In fact, we got to talk about how you prepare yourself financially in light of this socialist authoritarian power grab. What do you do? How can you preserve your money? Well, I talked to one investor who actually is really bullish on Bitcoin, like really, really bullish on Bitcoin. He actually has a pretty good thesis, though. This is a kind of insurance, in his view, an insurance against real disaster in the world. Don't go anywhere. I've got my excerpt from the interview with Greg Foss coming up next. Okay, Bitcoin is on a tear. You know that. I like it a lot. I've always liked it, going all the way back to 2012 for a whole lot of reasons. But now I have a new reason to like it. I have a very new reason, along with a very bullish call to tell you about. And it's because you need to think of Bitcoin a little bit like insurance, right? Insurance against a disaster in the world. And given what we are now seeing with our own government, talking about we, the government, instead of we, the people, well, who's to say you won't see that disaster a little sooner than we think, right? Anyway, I sat down with a guy who has spent his career looking at fixed income bond markets. And he reminded me that, you know what, if you had bought insurance on Lehman Brothers in a CDS back in 2006, you could have bought it for like $9. And then guess what that became worth? Something like $5 million when Lehman went down. Now, you were betting against what was really considered impossible at the time, right? Lehman wasn't really going to go under. Well, he's making the point that what happens if a major G7 really comes into financial distress and their currency really goes under? What happens then? How do we think about how we interact with each other and what currencies are? He's saying in that case, you know what? Bitcoin could be worth a whole lot of money, like a lot of money. I want to play you the clip. Here is Greg Foss talking about where he sees the valuation of Bitcoin on my podcast, American Consequences. In fact, I'll tell you where you can get that podcast in just a little bit, but listen.
I can come up with pretty easy valuations of Bitcoin that are, 10 times higher than the current trading level.
10 times higher. So
and that's low.
600,000 a coin, 500,000 a coin.
Okay, easily 2 million.
Woohoo! All right, so at that point, I nearly fell off my chair. But what's fascinating is then he walked me through the whole math, and he told me how he got there. And he's basically looking at, the value of each country's economic output, what they contribute, etc. And he's got a whole mathematical analysis. He's a former engineer, longtime trader, and now actually works in the energy business and is trying to use Bitcoin and algorithms that are applied in the Bitcoin space and blockchain for energy. But it was a fascinating interview because he walked me through how he would get to that valuation. Now, that's pretty darn high. I mean, that said, I don't think I could have told you back in 2012 when Bitcoin would, fluctuate between $100 and $1,000. I couldn't have told you that we would be at, 55,000 these days. I thought it was worth something, not necessarily 55,000. So in light of this, you really should check out the podcast. It's my American Consequences podcast. You can actually go to trishintel.com where we have a sign up. It's free. You can get the magazine. We've got some great writing, myself included, in there, as well as the tremendous writer, PJ O'Rourke. We have Ron Paul. We have my friend Seb Gorka contributes, Gordon Chang as well. Just a tremendous roster, Buck Sexton. Everybody's in there. And so you can really read some fascinating stuff and hopefully get my podcast, my regular podcast on Trish Intel, but also this one where I do some very provocative, insightful, interesting interviews about the market. And look, I still like Bitcoin. I don't know if it's going to $2 million, but I really like it, even at these valuations, because I think you need to be prepared. You need to be prepared because, Uncle Sam, or in this case, Uncle Joe, he's out for something, and you want to protect yourself. So go to trishintel.com, get much more information. You can sign up there so you get the podcast, and I look forward to talking to you again tomorrow.